everybody, welcome to Film Juice. My name is Mike. Today we're going to be talking about a film called Men from this year, 2022, directed by Alex Garland. You may recognize that name from Ex Machina, another film he wrote and directed, and it's brilliant, and it has Oscar Isaac, and everyone should see it. This is a very different movie from Ex Machina. It's a very different movie from, I think, most things that he's done. You get a little bit of a Shining vibe. You get a little bit of some body horror, some David Lynch imagery. Some very punctuated themes that are driven home very deeply. This film is about a broken woman who, in trying to piece her life back together, is forced to fall apart even further than she already has. And it's a little bit of like a journey. She's overcoming all sorts of these obstacles. It sounds very simplistic. It's kind of a little bit of a mindfuck, but we'll get to that. So what we have here is a woman who witnessed her husband fall to his death in slow motion, as you see in the trailer. Her name is Harper. So I can't remember the actress's name, so I'm just going to call her Harper, which I should anyway. So Harper, after we see this flashback of her husband falling from outside the window, she is driving up the countryside. She's going on a little vacation, a little decompression, a little time away from work, ultimately trying to escape the trauma that she suffered. And this is a trauma that the film is going to refer back to multiple times. It's a little bit of a mystery. It's a bit of a puzzle putting it together. What exactly resulted in Harper's husband's death. And it's every time that it's unraveled, you get a different character introduced. Very episodic. This woman, every day something seems to be happening to her. So first day she meets her landlord, seems innocent enough. Next day she runs into who I'm just going to call Naked Man, who starts stalking her. Then she meets Little Man Boy, who for some reason wears a plastic, kind of like a pinup doll looking mask. Then she meets a vicar, who's basically a priest. And then she meets a policeman and two other guys at a pub. We flash back. We learn that her husband threatened to kill himself because she was wanting a divorce. The next thing we see after that is that, he fell from the window, so he must have killed himself. The last thing he tells her is, it's going to be as if you killed me. So he's really driving home that guilt. She's stuck in that moment of, she and her husband are having this horrible fight. She's trying to explain the divorce to him, but he's not having it. He's in extreme denial about it. He threatens to kill himself. Next thing she knows, he's flying out of the window, the floor above him. So we get this guilt that's been branded onto her that there's no escaping. It's a permanent scar. And this is just one of several flashbacks. I don't want to go through the entire plot in serious detail, but at least each character. We're introduced... Honestly, I could go the review without even mentioning this person, probably. But we're introduced to a friend of hers who she FaceTimes with occasionally. And she says something to the friend, and this is the only reason I brought her up, is that she says something like trying to assure her friend that she's okay by herself. She says something about how this happens every time, and I'll be fine this time. So it seems like maybe it's during the anniversary of his death, of her husband's death, and she retreats into herself every single time. And something that made me also aware of that line, which I was like, okay, that's just a bit of throwaway history they want to give the viewer. But there's a baby grand in this gorgeous house that she's staying at, and she starts playing Chopin's Opus 9, number 2. I think I'm saying that right. It's a piece of music that's known for repeating itself and increasing its intensity and getting more sophisticated in instrumentation through every time it repeats the same melody, the same notes over and over again. And this made me think of what she told her friend, which was that I go through this every time. Like, she's maybe having a depressive episode, she's having flashbacks. Maybe because they don't explicitly say it, but maybe it's because this is the anniversary of his death. And I just thought that was a clever piece of music to include in there. So she's playing the piano, she stops, and of course we see naked man outside the window. We start seeing, the more you see him, the more you see he's disfigured. It looks like he's been crawling around some bushes, and he's all cut up. Let me just say right now, naked man is not explained. Everyone regards him as a drifter, and nobody knows who he is. The reason, okay, so he tries to break into her house. She calls the police. They catch him. There's a female officer that interviews Harper, and she seems to completely dismiss Harper's feelings. Harper's obviously shaken and upset. And the officer just is smiling, and she's saying, well, he's just a crazy person. You know how they are. And it's as if Harper's feelings don't even matter. And while the female officer is trying to reassure Harper, there's some intercutting with Harper's husband hitting her in the mouth. Next, like I said, this is a very episodic movie. Next, Harper visits a church nearby. She has flashbacks while she's sitting in one of the pews, and she screams. And you see a figure in the background kind of watching her, kind of disregard it. She goes outside to leave. I call him Little Man Boy because he has the features of a 45-year-old man, but he's only about 5'2". He's wearing this blonde-haired Caucasian lady mask for some reason, which I think is just another play on, look at how this male is treating women as kind of like a mask, something fun to put on. So he's this little man boy is creepy, and he's chased off by the vicar, the priest guy. So the vicar asks Harper, if she wants to sit down, if he can help her. They sit down. We learn more of her story, that she kicked her husband out after he punched her, and that he pushed his way into the apartment directly upstairs and either fell trying to crawl down to his own balcony, or he threw himself. She'll never know which, is what she tells him. And this vicar is a real prick. He asks if she wonders he asks her if she wonders why or how she drove him to kill himself. And is it because she never gave him a chance to apologize? He even says that it's okay for men to strike women occasionally. And I have this quoted: if you'd given him a chance to apologize, he might still be alive. To which she just replies, fuck off, and walks off. So here's someone else that's hitting her in the guilt bone, who's trying to make her feel responsible for her husband's death. And this is something that she already blamed herself for. She decides to go to a nearby pub that was recommended. She sees one of the police officers that responded to her call about a naked man is there, and she hears from him that they let the guy go because he's harmless and he's just a crazy guy, and if he comes around again, just let them know and they'll take care of it. And she leaves pretty angry. And all of them, and they're nothing but, I think, 4 other guys in the bar, they're all very dismissive of her. They're kind of laughing. They're not taking her seriously. And it's just yet another little episode of how chauvinistic men can be. So Harper leaves the pub pretty angry. On the way, she starts hearing noises behind her. She starts running. Then you see, in the background, naked man coming after her. There's a whole sequence of her running through the house, only for Jeffrey, the landlord, to come in and say, okay, let's look around. He finds a crow on the ground, which I found his reaction to the crow is very sympathetic, very merciful. It's kind of a kindness that, well, he's definitely not the worst male character in the movie. It's definitely kind of a slap in the face to her, because here's this poor woman that's scared to death, and yet he feels bad for a dying bird. Nevertheless, Jeffrey decides to wander the premises, and he vanishes, only to be replaced by naked man with trees growing out of his face. He weirdly blows dandelions into Harper's face. It's a very serene, very calming scene. She wanders inside calmly. Naked man sticks his arm into the mail slot again, but very gently. She grabs his hand back, but then he grabs her wrist and tries to pull her. Ambushed again by the patriarchy, I guess. And she has a knife. She's armed with a kitchen knife, so she stabs him in the forearm, and he drags his whole forearm through the knife. I'm sorry. So that the knife goes through him. You know what I mean. There's a long gash in his left arm that separates his ring finger and his middle finger. This is the same wound that her husband had when she saw his body after he fell off the building. Her husband's arm was caught when he fell onto a spiked gate. So, back to inside the house, we see a little man boy. He's got the same wound. This scene's a little on the nose because he wants to play hide and seek. She opts not to hide. The vicar walks in. Again, all these, whatever you want to call them, ghosts, visions, they all have the same wound in their arm that her husband had. And which, in her own mind, she caused. And the vicar tries to get a little handsy with her. Let's just skip to the end. I'm tired of talking about the plot. Look, basically what happens, she ends up back in the house. Every single one of these guys appears before her, and you're hearing this correctly. Each one gives birth to the other. It's pretty gross and very graphic, but it's perfectly creepy. Let's see. I have this written down, actually. Let's see what happens. Let's see. So, naked tree man returns pregnant with a huge belly. He gives birth to little man boy, who was born pregnant. Little man boy gives birth to the vicar. the vicar, his spine bursts open, and he gives birth to Jeffrey, the landlord. Jeffrey gives birth through his own mouth to Harper's dead husband. So she takes a beat, sits down with her dead husband, and she finally turns to him and asks him, "What do you want?" And James responds, James is her husband, I don't think I've said his name. He says, I want your love. And Harper just kind of scoffs and says, yeah. There's a little bit of like post-credit-ish sequence where Harper's friend that she was FaceTiming with shows up to the house and kind of answers a couple of questions. She finds the wreckage of Harper's car, which was caused by Jeffrey, which I fast-forwarded over because I don't care about that. And she also finds blood, and then she finds Harper covered in blood, but smiling. And a lot of what this movie was about, and I've already said it, was just recovering from trauma, and it's not a coincidence that each of these male characters are Russian nesting dolls, each giving birth to the other. You have James, her husband, who is a guilt machine. He started the whole thing. He planted the seed of guilt. You have Jeffrey, who's very accommodating, but ultimately is weak. You have little man boy who openly mocks women by wearing that mask, that plastic lady mask that he wears. You have the vicar who thinks it's okay to be a misogynist. You have the police who are useless. And so you have this whole gamut of negative emotion. You have ignorance from the police. You have lust and blame from the vicar. From little man boy, you get this mockery. From Jeffrey, you get respect, but there's a veil of respect. I think this was a very unique film. The movie makes some interesting decisions. Again, it's about emotional abuse, physical abuse, the cycle of those things, and how the cycle is inescapable without accepting the truth. And I felt as though the ending had a lot to do with Harper accepting the truth that maybe she didn't love James to begin with, and that's why she was ending the relationship. And in doing so, in the very, very last scene, she's seen smiling as if she's been liberated. So she's kind of let go of that ghost. The more disgusting parts of the movie, aside from people giving birth through different parts of their body, was the misogynistic elements of the vicar kind of hitting on her, little man boy calling her a bitch at a certain point, Jeffrey feeling the need that Jeffrey kind of giving off the air of a white knight, where he feels like this is a woman and she must need me, which is also just a form of disrespect in some cases. You have the police who just in this film do not take her seriously. So yeah, there's a lot of angles here, mostly to do with the emotional gender gap. More to do with respect among sexes. I tried to apply the different stages of grief to each of these characters, and it just didn't quite work. I tried to do something. But each one represents a different stage or different obstacle that men present emotionally to women. And the only way she came out on top, because she doesn't. Depending on how you view what these characters are, whether they're ghosts, demons, angels, all in her head, depending on how you view what they are, she doesn't really kill any of them. She finds ways to avoid them, and then she finds the ultimate way to overcome her trauma, or at least begin to overcome it, is to admit, I didn't love my husband. That's how I felt. It was his decision to commit suicide. So it's a somber movie. It's got some great gross out stuff. I believe it's shot in Scotland, so it's a very pretty looking movie. Great performances all around. The lead actress, Jessie Buckley, really great performance. Every single one of the male actors was great and creepy. And yeah, as a warning, there's a lot of dong in here. Look, in England, they just don't care. Okay? It's okay. It's gonna be alright if you see one or two or four, I think. So see this movie. If it's an A24 movie, so if you're into their weird, if you're into the films that they distribute, you're gonna want to give this a shot. It's different. It's different for, I believe, horror movies. It's not just a slasher movie. It's very psychological, but it also does a lot of great body horror things, and it made it even more worth my time. So, see Men. I knew I was going to say it eventually, but go watch Men. It's a trip. It's nice and short too, so give it a shot. And thank you for listening to Film Juice. We are on Spotify, or we are on Apple Podcasts. We are on YouTube with visual aids. And hopefully we'll be on some more platforms soon. So if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. Leave us some comments, ratings, whatever the equivalent of is to comments on what you're listening to. You know what I'm saying. Just comment, rate, subscribe, whatever. Do all the things that... Just any positive affirmation you can think of, just bestow upon us, please. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.